I wanted to go right back to the beginning. I mean, your musical journey started quite early on. I believe you're about 11.
Yes.
What,
Yeah.
I mean, what's your first kind of musical memory? I know what mine is, but what
My
was
first musical memory, believe it or not, it was a Blink 182 concert when I was 10.
yeah.
That was the first concert that I ever went to. I remember I was like really begging my parents to let me go.
Yeah.
But this flaming, the set piece was this big giant sign that just said fuck, that was on fire.
That one, yeah.
You remember that tour?
Yeah.
So I was like, how can I go, please? And they let me go with my friends. And I was like, I need to be in a band.
Yeah. My first experience of Blink, they played one of their first UK shows in a bar in London that held about 100 people.
No way.
Yeah, there's a venue in London, there's a famous venue in London called the Astoria, which isn't, that whole area's been kind of knocked down. There's such a massive history to it. There's a whole musical area to it. It's all been renovated now, but around the corner from this theatre that used to put on all the big rock shows, all the big pop shows, there was a little bar called the Borderline, and everybody's played there from like Nirvana.
Oh, I've heard of Borderline for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was where the first time I ever saw Blink 182 was in there.
Wow.
And then
that's so cool, man. I definitely never saw them in a room that small. So
yeah,
that's
very few bands you see in places like that, but when you do, I think you kind of remember it. But I mean, in terms of the artists that had the biggest impact on you, then who was that? Who really kind of made you want to go down a musical path?
I mean, at 10, that was the first thing I got into. So the first band that I ever had was us trying to be them. Yeah. So back then it was that. I mean, musically for me, I kind of come at it from a slightly different angle. I'm not classically trained in any instrument. I pretty much just play all the main instruments, like very mediocre and enough to just be able to write and produce. But I fell in love with music production when I started learning Pro Tools and Logic. So everything that I grew up on, from, you know, nocturnes from Chopin to Blink 182 to Muse to seeing musical theater shows on Broadway. I grew up in New York. I just kind of loved all of it, but I wanted to do a little bit of everything. So that's kind of how I found my path into being more of a producer, so I can work with multiple different artists across different genres.
Okay. I mean, in terms of musical theatre then, I mean, growing up in New York and Broadway, there must have been a wealth of influence there. I mean, that must have just been mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. Yeah. I mean, since I was a kid, I always, one day I want to figure out how to do this, but I don't come from that world. I was never in plays growing up or anything like that. So
was that something out of choice, like a path you didn't really kind of want to follow? Or
no, I just kind of went down. You know what? Actually, that's incorrect. When I was very young, I was in plays, like before 10 years old. I actually played Oliver when I was really, really young. But when I got a guitar, I stopped doing all of that. And I just kind of went headfirst into bands, and then headfirst into DJing, and then that led to some, songwriting and producing and so on.
Okay, on that note then, I mean, obviously Cages came together in 2019. That's kind of brought you full circle back then. What took you into that?
It is actually, it's so actually we started writing that in 2014, if you can believe. It's been a journey. And that really started with Ben and I, who I wrote the show with, co-creator. He comes from a film composing and pop music background, and I come from a little bit more of a pop songwriting, although he's also an incredible songwriter, that type of background. But I approach things more from a sonic landscape. So I'll look at frequencies, and I like to mix frequencies that, fit into a box perfectly together. That's kind of how I look at music. And he is a very classically trained pianist. He's incredible. So
how did you meet?
We met at a bar, actually, randomly. Yeah, it was just a beer summit of friends and songwriters in LA. And there was about 10 of us at a table. And he was sitting across the table, and I was like, this dude is hilarious. Like, I gotta get to know this guy. And we started talking, and, we found a common interest in some, more left of center pop bands like Mike Snow and Grimes. We were both into at the time, and we were like, oh, how come there's not more of this in pop? And that turned into us. And how come musical theater doesn't sound like this? And what would happen if there was a narrow based thing that had this kind of sonic landscape.
Okay, I mean, when you kind of, like you said, you started writing Cages in that 2014. What was your original vision for it? And were you both kind of, given that you came from different, like you said, different backgrounds, was it a similar vision?
It's a very, very similar vision. Yeah, we, unlike what's in LA, in London, in LA, we had a lot of immersive theater elements as well.
Right.
So for the actual composition of it, we want to do a rock opera that sounds like the music that we're listening to. And there needs to be a story, and then we wanted to figure out a new way to be able to tell the story. We were both very into projection mapping. This is going back even before when we first met in 2012. And back then there weren't many shows using projections. So we started just experimenting with that, did a bunch of pop-up shows for an EP that is actually not on the Cages soundtrack, has nothing to do with it, but that's kind of what got our start into doing productions based around the projection mapping.
Okay, in terms of the live show, then obviously you brought it over to London. How difficult is it to transcribe it from a vision or an idea on paper into a live show, especially when you're bringing it halfway across the world?
Yeah, a lot harder than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I remember when we finished writing it, and we had the venue at the time in LA, and we're telling everyone, oh yeah, we're going to be open in like 8 months. Like, we're just doing all the filming right now. It should be simple. It took 3 years from that moment to get it even open. And then the next challenge was transferring it here, because we had only ever done it in one place.
Yeah.
There's so many, from shipping projectors out, and very specific, only one model of projector works for us because of the speed that we need the shutters to close. It has to be laser. There's all these different things that go into it. And we had 11 days to set it up here.
Oh, okay.
So it was just I don't even remember what happened in those 11 days. We were just working around the clock.
Yeah.
But we got it up, and it's been fun.
Yeah, I was going to ask how's it been going, because I think it launched a couple of weeks ago, didn't it? It was like 2 weeks ago. What's it been like?
I've been, first of all, loving London. It's a very different audience than LA, but I think it's slowly finding its ground. LA was very loud and rowdy, the crowds. It was just a totally different thing. And here it's very polite. But we're seeing now, as it's been 2 weeks since opening, crowds are getting a little louder, and it's finding its groove.
Brilliant. Okay, I mean, just going back, you've talked about your production a lot, and it's obviously something you're very passionate about. I mean, you've written for everyone from Nelly to Panic at the Disco. There's a whole range of acts. I mean, what inspiration do you take from those artists, especially into Cages, and both as a producer and a performer?
I mean, from the artist himself, I'm just so thankful to be able to work with them. I'm working with another artist right now who you'll hear about soon, who is just such a visionary, so incredible.
Yeah. And
I love being able to just come in and help them execute their vision and make it sound like what they're hearing in their head together. Right. That's really my favorite thing to do. And I love being able to jump across genres.
Yeah.
Like be able to do a hip hop track and then be able to do like a metal song, and it just keeps music fun for me. I feel like when I was in a band, I didn't really like it because I got kind of pigeonholed into a specific sound that I had to keep making over and over again. Yeah. And I just didn't really find any joy in that. Whereas I'm always on my toes.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, who would your ultimate collaboration be with?
Ooh, that's tough. That's tough. It might have to be, I mean, I feel like it's changing all the time. Matt Bellamy would be a dream. I just think he's an absolute genius. Yeah. He actually came to Cages in LA.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, that's my hero since I was, I don't know, probably 15. Yeah. And that night, I remember we had a crazy glitch in the system. And I was like, no, we can't. We can't go wrong tonight. Him, Kevin Parker, Tame Impala would be amazing as well if we're talking about current modern day.
The usual answer gets David Bowie to that question.
I mean, yeah, if we're going back in time, yeah, I'm gonna go with Bowie.
everybody's a David Bowie. Okay, I mean, the show's been described as pop meets Broadway meets futuristic theatre. What's your vision for it going forward? Now you've taken it out on tour outside of America and you've gone to the UK, and it's obviously been successful. What's your kind of vision going forward to maybe next year?
I think we're still just really tightening the show up, learning, ways to make everything better, both visually, sonically, tightening the experience. That's kind of what I see for the next couple of years, us just refining it and making it as great a piece as it possibly can be while we bring it to different cities.
Okay. I mean, in terms of, I've spoken to a lot of bands over the last few years. I mean, the music industry has changed a lot over the last few years, given what's gone on. But in a kind of weird way, there's been a lot of exciting opportunities for bands with live streaming and what they could do with that. In terms of your own personal experiences, does the way the landscape's changed excite you, given the type of work you do as a producer and with the theatre and the obviously all of that element? I mean, you must be quite excited for the future to see what it kind of holds.
I'm so excited. I think there's going to be more of everything. So I don't ever think live music, live entertainment is going to go away, because people are always going to need to physically connect. But I'm also very excited by the possibility of VR and metaverse concerts once the tech catches up and people are able to connect with their friend on the other side of the world and meet them at a virtual concert. That's exciting to me as well.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen so many web streams over the last few years where you're like, wow, that is stunning.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's getting exciting, and it's only going to get better.
For people, like you said, the crowds in London are coming out and they're starting to get louder. Have you got any message for anyone that hasn't seen the show yet, given that it's got another 2 or 3 months to go?
Yeah, I would say come out, don't look anything up about it, and have yourself an interesting night of live entertainment.